7 people who are part of a child sex abuse ring have been handed life sentences here at the High Court in Glasgow. Ian Owens, who was 45, Elaine Lannery, 39, Leslie Williams, 41, Paul Brannan, 41, Scott Forbes, 50, Barry Watson, who was 47, and John Clark, who was also 47, were all handed lifelong restriction orders. They were all convicted of crimes of extraordinary depravity in a drugs den in Glasgow where heroin and crack cocaine were used. Lord Beckett said it was the worst of human behaviour beyond anything he had ever experienced in the years in court. Some were convicted of harming 2 children, others of abusing 3 children, where 4 of the defendants were found guilty of attempting to murder a child following an 8-week trial at the High Court in Glasgow 14 months ago in November 2023. 4 of the group, Owens, Lannery, Brannan and Williams, were also found guilty of attempting to murder a child by pushing her into a microwave and trapping her in other places. All 7 were found guilty of taking part in the gang rape of a child. Judge Lord Beckett told the gang, whose jail sentences totalled more than 93 years, that they may never be released from prison. Owens was given 20 years, Elaine Lannery 17, Leslie Williams 14, Paul Brannan 15, Scott Forbes 8, Barry Watson 9 years and 6 months, and John Clark 10 years. The court heard that Owens forced 2 of the children to ingest heroin and cocaine in his filthy flat, and the judge branded the offences humiliating, degrading sexual crimes against incredibly vulnerable children. All 7 subjected a little girl to a gang sex attack at a property where both women, Lannery and Williams, are said to have clapped and cheered and verbally encouraged the men involved in the horrific act. They held her down and involved another child in the sickening abuse, which took place in various locations between December the 1st, 2018 and June the 19th, 2019. Speaking when they were found guilty in November 2023, Detective Superintendent Nicola Kilbane gave this statement.
The levels of depravity shown in this case are extremely rare in Scotland, and the courage of the victims was essential in securing this conviction. This was a long, complex and challenging investigation for a team of officers and staff who had to work through the most harrowing evidence to bring those responsible for these despicable crimes to justice. We remain committed to supporting victims of sexual crime and protecting children from harm and abuse.
Throughout the trial, those in the dock were laughing, they were joking, they didn't take this seriously at all. And even today there was no real remorse. What was the investigation's view on those people as you interviewed them? How would you describe those people convicted today?
I can't really comment on how they've conducted themselves and behaved in the court. However, I think the convictions today speak loud and clear in regards to the abuse and the fact that it won't be tolerated, and that we will use all available resource to investigate and bring those people to justice.
It was here that the sickening stream of abuse by the paedophile gang took place in 2018. The trial heard that the children first came into contact with social work in Glasgow in August in 2017 and were deemed to be at risk in July 2018. But the allegations of violence and sexual abuse did not come to light until March 2020. Scottish Sun crime reporter Graham Mann covered the case from the beginning after receiving a tip-off.
Well, in October 2020, we got information from a couple of sources actually who know the area well, who contacted us to tell us of what we initially almost couldn't believe, that there were around 14 people who were accused of being part of a paedophile ring. Obviously, as you can imagine, it seemed almost inconceivable that something like that could be happening in a place like this. So we felt duty-bound, obviously, to look into it, and we came down to the area where we'd been told that there was an ongoing police investigation, and lo and behold, there were police at the scene of a property, which obviously we didn't realise at the time, but that was at the centre of this horrendous series of events. And we also contacted the police, and they confirmed that there was indeed an investigation ongoing.
During the trial, jurors had to listen to harrowing and complex information from 55 witnesses, 28 days of evidence and 11 closing speeches from defence lawyers. One victim described the dingy, filthy flat as the dark and scary beastie house because she had been locked in a cupboard with a box that was full of spiders. The nature of the evidence was truly horrific, with the judge praising the victim impact statements from the children, adding of the oldest child, an impression of innate humanity shines through her words.
They were convicted over a year ago now at the High Court in Glasgow after the most horrific trial, harrowing for even more experienced court reporters and staff, and obviously lawyers and police as well, who have to sit through these things. But obviously the biggest concern is obviously for the children at the centre of it, and they obviously had to go through the process of giving evidence, which they did through interviews with the police, and the events that they described were just simply horrific. Lord Beckett pointed out that the court over the years has heard some of the worst forms of human behaviour, but he noted that this was beyond anything that he had ever experienced before. The gravity of the crimes was just incredible, and it's hard to imagine how this could have happened. Any normal person would just be rightly appalled by it, and I think the sentences that they got today just absolutely make it crystal clear just how serious these offences were.
Despite being found guilty and being sentenced today, all 7 deny any sexual activity with any of the children involved. During the trial and sentencing today, there were moments in court where some of the paedophile gang reacted during proceedings.
I think it is important to point out that all 7 of the people who were convicted continue to deny any involvement in sexual offences. But the evidence obviously persuaded the jury to find all 7 of them guilty, and I don't think there was ever any doubt that they were going to be sentenced to extremely lengthy prison sentences, and that's what happened today. Throughout the process, actually, there were moments when certain individuals were quite vocal when they were in the dock. I remember, for example, Scott Forbes at one point shouting that he was innocent, and that was on a previous occasion. But when they got sentenced today, at one point, I'm someone actually retched in the dock, and then there were 1 or 2 other outbursts, and at the very end, there was a bit of a commotion in the dock as they learned just how much time they are going to be spending behind bars, and they were actually warned by Lord Beckett that they may never be released. So you can imagine how they would react to that, particularly because they are absolutely adamant that they are not guilty of these offences.
The very thing that they're saying, when they say close the borders and all that, we all know what that means. Close the borders and whatnot, and the discussion needs to be had about grooming gangs and whatnot. Okay, let's have that discussion. Let's sit down and let's have that discussion about grooming gangs, and let's actually talk about it. Let's see what Islam says. Now, Islam says they should be hanged, capital punishment, and end of story. Now, why is it? I'm sure you'll be happy for that punish happen. I'm speaking to those hypocrites, not everyone else. That you'll be happy with that punishment for, say, why, especially if he's from a Muslim background, regardless is a practicing one or not. If they do some sort of crime seem to irk you a bit more, like give you a little bit more oomph, like in your hatred towards it. That's the thing I don't get. Now, Islam would literally take him court of law with evidence, and they'll be flogged or hanged or capital punishment. During that, back in the days, they never had lethal injection and whatnot, so they did it in a certain way. I'm sure now lethal punishment will be a different way. Like even in the America, when they used to kill people with injection, capital punishment, why did they used to have visitors, family members and others, and cameras and stuff to show as a deterrence? That's what it is, public flogging and whatnot. But obviously with the times you move on, you innovate, but the punishment thing, deterrent thing stays. So that's what it is. Now, about working and these people, the rich 1% are jumping on the bandwagon of immigrants out, Even this place won't run. Look at this guy here. Look, dropping food, yeah? Just imagine in the UK, you won't hardly see someone like born and brought up from the UK doing that. Like if you love doing the numbers when it's grooming gangs and whatnot. And if you want to have a talk about grooming gangs and the percentage and whatnot, let's sit down and have a talk about it. Let's sit down and talk about it, okay? And let's do the numbers. Let's crunch up the numbers and see who are the ones that are, if you're so bothered about a gang doing it or an individual doing it, what do you call a gang? Is it a gang when it's only 3 or 4 Asian people? And especially the chili powder gets added on when it's from a Muslim cultured background, which is they are not practicing at all. So, so yeah, so they're not practicing at all. And then does that constitute as a gang? I want to know. Let's have that discussion. They keep on saying a discussion needs to be had. Why repeat the same thing? Let's have a discussion. Let's see what Islam says about grooming gangs. What does actually the Sharia say? A Muslim grooming gang or a groomer or whatever does, what happens to them? They are literally capital punishment. That's it. End of story. Done. So I don't get it. Why the hypocrisy? I don't get the hypocrisy at all. Why does it hurt? Why does it burn more when it's a certain children, a victim? A victim's a victim. A victim shouldn't matter regardless where their background is from. But we all can see when the victim is from a certain background, the hypocrisy and all the hate comes out. And they use their unfortunate pain and trauma for their agenda. That's what it is. That's all it is. So the next time when they say a discussion needs to be had and we need to sit down and talk about it, let's talk about it. Let's sit down and talk about it. Let's see what Islam actually says. And let's talk about the immigrant stuff. Okay? Let's actually talk about it.